Greetings, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all today to our webinar. A big thank you for tuning in. We know how busy people are, so we're working hard to keep these events interesting and on target. We do encourage questions, so please use the question and chat tools in your webinar console. I always monitor them, and I'll be collecting them for a quick question and answer discussion after we finish. One housekeeping item, though, that's fairly important is that if you are dialing in on using your phone, please mute your microphone on your computer. On occasion, we get some background noise and it really affects the broadcast. A little bit about today's speaker. Some of this many of you have heard before, but I'll repeat it again because it deserves repeating. Min Bassiter began developing his insights about creative thinking and problem solving at Procter & Gamble more than 30 years ago. While at P&G, he received 3 U.S. patents and created a corporate-wide internal consulting practice. Following his award-winning doctoral research at the University of Cincinnati, Min became a professor of management in the Michael G. DeGroot School of Business at McMaster University. He continues to teach an executive education program for Aalto University and the Innovative and Creative Problem-Solving module at the Conference Board of Canada's Directors College. Min's first book, The Power of Innovation, became an instant CEO need to read. He founded Bassett Applied Creativity in 1981 and has since traveled the world applying and teaching Simplexity thinking to many of the world's Fortune 500 companies. Now I'm going to turn it over to Min, where he'll share some stories, delve into the art and science of optimization, and explain how evaluating and selecting the best ideas starts with divergence. Over to you, Min.
Thanks, Bob. And again, a big thank you to people who are tuning in another time. And welcome to those who this might be your first time. We'll do the best we can to please everybody. So I'm going to move on to maybe quick takeaways today. One key thing is generating appropriate criteria, measuring sticks. Watch how a facilitator who is biased can get in the way, and what to watch out for. Some tools, visual grids that you can use tools to compare, discuss, and I guess the best thing is some real live best examples we've got to show the variety of things that have happened and learn from them. Now, remember now, we've got this model we've been using for a long time. And the innovation process, as we've come to learn it, has 4 stages and 2 steps in each stage. Now, there is the generating of new possibilities stage, new problems, discovering new problems to solve. Second stage is really conceptualizing what is the problem, what is it we're trying to do, what is the opportunity, and then optimizing ideas that could solve it. And that's where we are today in the optimization. And then, critical, how do we get the idea that we pick or the ideas that we pick implemented? We've got problem finding and fact finding and generating, and we've got problem definition and idea finding. Now, in optimizing, we're going to focus on number 5, but it's all around evaluating, selecting great ideas and planning for implementation. And then implementing is doing action and gaining other people's acceptance, okay? So that's where we are. Now, optimization, we looked it up in a dictionary, and basically it's trying to make something as good as it could be, as fully perfect, effective as it could be. It could be an idea, a design, a system, or a decision. And sometimes this is easier. It's purely mathematical. Find the maximum value of a function. So what should the price be? Matching supply to demand. But sometimes, and in the real world, it requires a lot more than mathematics. Here we are, and you'll notice in step 5, there's a diverging step and a converging in the very same step. And often people wonder, how in the world could you be diverging on the left-hand side in a step that really calls for converging? And this is the secret. We are taught in our lives to optimize more than generate or conceptualize. This is our research, 22,000 people all over the world, and where they like to be is they prefer to be in evaluate, select over conceptualize and generate. So that's good for today. But not as much as to implement. Almost half of our people prefer the action-oriented part, and one of the problems is they tend to skip over the optimization part, and that's what we're going to get into. So we got to see what we're dealing with and get really good at optimization. Now, why do many new product ideas launches fail? This brings us here. People don't take the time to evaluate the idea properly, and they often jump to action right away. We all know that syndrome where we are so eager to go, we don't put the effort to think it through. Now, here, some of you will remember, this is a giant bank. They're really competing with other banks, and they're trying to make a lot of new financial products, but they're getting a high percentage of failures. Here is a snapshot of their teams, many, many teams. Each dot there is a person. And if you look at where the most people are, it's on the implementation side, getting very close to lots of implementers. So what are we going to do? Well, what happened was we discovered that you don't fire the implementers, but what has to happen is a little more patience, and many new ideas were going directly from generator to implementer, directly right to left, and people were not taking the time to work their way downwards clockwise from generating the possibility to conceptualizing it really well, strategize, and then over to the left to make the best possible version of it, and then go into market. And so if they would slow down, so you don't fire the implementers, but everybody has to slow down a bit so we can go around the process, not jump from, as we say, 1 to 8 or 1 to 4. Now here's another example that we've shown some of you before. This is a company that's making a food of some kind and manufacturing it, very profitable, and they've got a lot of problems, and they got, in spite of these, they got a lot of quality defects, a lot of rework, a lot of firefighting, processes that are not working, but what they're good at is putting Band-Aids on these processes and still get them out there and make money. Now here's the team. If you can look at this group, you've got a majority, very strong majority of implementers. And what they're good at is getting the stuff out there and sold regardless of some of the problems they're having, which are really optimization problems. And if this company wants to keep on doing what they're doing, fine, but if they want to be good managers and they want to improve their profitability by reducing their costs, they're going to want to spend more time on optimization, which they don't do much of now, and start solving these problems. So it all works out so you can see what's going on. Now, let's do it right. Some things are easy. What's the longest table? Measure it. Who's the tallest person? Let's measure their heights. Who's the heaviest person in our department? Get a scale. Those are easy things. Some are harder. Who's the best person for the job? Best third baseman? Best idea? Well, for those who need criteria, for the third baseman, what are the criteria? Number of hits in a season, fewest errors, most attractive to the fans. They like them the best. They fill in the seats. Easiest with the press. What is it? We're best thrower? What are we talking about? And we probably have different versions. So we have to kind of agree on the criteria. Now, we also need multiple criteria. Hold a box of candy in front of a small kid. What's the criterion? Probably he might pick the biggest one, that size. But an adult, calories, easy on my teeth, not messy in my hands, the color, the smell, many, many different criteria. And adults will probably make a multiple criteria choice where they figure out in their heads. Now, when people are involved, it's a lot harder when people have to agree and have to talk together. And we need to agree on criteria, and criteria really are measures. They are ways of measuring things like ideas. Now, do you remember the great Carnac? I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember Johnny Carson and the great Carnac. He used to show up on the Johnny Carson show. Of course, it was Johnny Carson. And he was a Swami, and he always knew the right questions but never knew the right answer. So we're going to let you play a game now, and if you're together with a bunch of people in a room or 2 or 3, take a crack at guessing before the answer comes out. This person says, I picked this idea because it would excite people and make them want to work harder. Now the question becomes, what's the criterion in the back of this person's mind, okay? And you might do a little bit of guessing, and I'll show you what we meant by this one here, and it was effect on motivation. That's what we're really trying to say. Now, we've got this idea, it would encourage our customers and clients to share their knowledge and plans freely with us. Share. What do you think might be the criterion? A couple of quick guesses, and what we were thinking of was effect on trust. Next criterion has to do with, I picked this idea because it's easy to understand by everyone. We always make jokes by saying even the sales guys would know, or even HR would know. What's the criterion? It is simplicity. Next, I picked this idea because it would really be effective. Now, by this, I need to help you. We really mean, that word effective is a funny word. What we really mean, it would have a high impact on whatever problem that we're solving, whatever that how might we is. So we've termed this impact on our how might we. Keep your eyes on the ball, how might we are trying to solve. Next, pick this idea because we could get started right away and finish soon. And the criterion for this is, after a couple of guesses, time to implement. Shorter time, obviously, the better. Now, once we got it implemented, it would last a long time, this idea. So you might have a couple of different versions of this. We picked durability, sustainability, longevity, that type of thing. Picked this idea because I think I would really get turned on myself and enjoy putting it into practice. So this could be something like degree of personal commitment. This is a big one. No idea will get done unless there's at least one person personally committed to make it work. Picked this idea because I know we can do it. It's well within our capabilities. And in engineering lingo, this is usually something like feasibility. Pick this idea because there's nothing pie in the sky about it. It'll work. And here, I think a lot of people will guess it's the P word, practicality. This idea, I like it because it's bound to attract a lot of new customers, and we won't lose any of our current customers. Now, which department in an organization would like that? And it's going to be the sales department. Effect on sales. Now, this idea will require cooperation of colleagues from several diverse departments. Okay, and here's what we were thinking. If they've got to cooperate, it's going to be effect on teamwork. Next one, I picked this idea because we don't have to buy anything. And that one is, usually it comes up pretty quickly as cost. Now this idea, I like it because we could do it without hiring anybody new. And that would mean availability of people to do it. Pick this idea because my colleagues would like it a lot, not have to talk many people into it, so it's likelihood of acceptance by others. So I hope you're doing pretty well on these. As you can see, there's different ways to say things. Now, pick this idea because it cannot easily be copied. So here we're talking about things like proprietariness, novelty, and that kind of thing. Pick this idea because it would not be hard to do. Again, nice and simple, ease of implementation. Pick this idea because it wouldn't need much clearance from the lawyers, which would mean essentially legality. Now, in every situation where we have to evaluate, we have got to do a good job of asking ourselves by what criteria might we evaluate our selected ideas. Get a bunch down, listen to each other, and then start talking about which ones might be the more important. Let's go back to an example we used earlier. This is a franchisee-franchisor situation where the problem definition came out, how might we help each other improve operating profitability, which led to how might we get our franchisees to focus on winning, be more effective with our new customers, and also how might we agree on mutual goals. Problem definition continued to how might we build two-way trust in order to come up with mutually agreed goals. Big one, how might we get a long-term strategy, and then a bunch more. Now, what the group had to do when they got this up, they said, okay, now we agree on how this problem looks, and they did some converging on picking these 1, 2, 3. Now, I'm going to use that first one to show you some of the ideas that came up in step 4. This was step 3. Here's step 4. Do joint strategic planning and operating planning. Jointly develop a reliable process for two-way communication. See the verbs? Share profit and loss statements. These were amongst different units. Now, these were 3 typical ones. Let's look at the criteria that were used on many, many ideas that came up. To what extent is the idea win-win for both groups, franchisee and company? Acceptability to the 93 franchisees who weren't here today, only 7 were. Feasibility, and how much impact on improving trust, the payoff on our how might we. Impact on success in the marketplace, long-term impact, amount of motivation the idea might create, and amount of shared commitment we have. Now, those are 8, but guess how many they picked from? They picked from about 50. Here's a whole bunch that didn't make it. Freedom from other problems, lead time needed, disruption, innovative, stabilization of the business, interest creation on the bottom left. To what extent would this idea create interest? Fun. Haha, not easily copied by the other people. Effect on profit, ease of implementation, need for unanimity, possibility of government intervention. These were all considered, but you can't use them all, so they came down to the 8. They talked, and they chose those 8. By the way, evaluation has a lot to do with discussion, conversation, not numbers, not analytical stuff. They talk. It's a science, but it's also an art. Now, here's some guidelines we've developed. What if you've got a bit of an idea already and you don't want to disrupt things by throwing it out there and you want to hold back? Don't hold back. You've got a preconceived option or idea, throw it out there and say, I've already had it. It's just the same as any others on the list. Get down to a few. You got a lot of people who just like this and they like that and they like this and they like that, but this is hard-nosed. You've got to get down and force yourself to get it done a few options. Then you got to clarify them. Just because you know what it means doesn't mean like somebody else knows. Get those criteria out and consider what's most important overall, not to my department, but overall. Watch for serious, risky, but often you'll have a very good idea or an option up there, and it's so darn good, people don't choose it or want to choose it because they're afraid of it. It's so darn risky. The idea is somebody's got to stand up for that idea and say, why aren't we talking about this one? Don't discard them. Talk about it, and you might end up taking the risk out of it or finding out ways to modify it and make it much better and much less riskier. Who knows? But you got to move good options forward. You can't just wait until things are perfect. You've got to move and take a little bit of a risk. We always say if it's important, it's going to come up sooner or later. Now, I used to feel that working with teams, the diverging aspect was hard, getting them to think out of the box. I think the converging part, the evaluation part, may be even more important. Teams don't really want to choose. They say, boy, if we only had 6 months more data before we pick, and then if we only had 3 more months data before we pick it. Everybody's hoping to get transferred off the team before they pick. It's a hard job. Now, tools. Here's a tool that we use a lot, and it's called the criteria grid. Here we pick, maybe we're down to 4 best ideas. We get ourselves down to maybe 4 or 5 best criteria, and we rate each idea against each criterion in turn. And we use numbers for only one reason. It's an easy way to say excellent, good, fair, or poor. And we have weighting factors in case we want to use them. And we rate each idea against each criterion in turn. Come straight down. And this is not ranking. This is rating. All of the ideas could be good. All the ideas could be bad. We're rating each idea against each criterion as we go down. Now, at the end, one thing we don't do is add up all the numbers. That was high school. You don't make big decisions by using numbers. Sometimes an idea might not have got the best total score, but it's a great idea because it was a little weak in a couple of places. Maybe it costs way too much. You're going to throw that a good idea away? The answer is no. You're going to talk about that idea and say, how might we make it better? How might we reduce that? How might we modify it? So it's conversation that counts, and you talk to each other and you listen hard. Now, you usually come up with a solution for at least one solution, and you state it, and that's the deliverable out of evaluate and select. Another tool we use is paired comparison analysis, or PCA, and this is to rate almost any options, problems, ideas, facts, etc. Here we rate, without using criteria explicitly, they're in our heads, We rate option A against option B. You'll see that first space. And we say, which is more important, A or B? Yeah, one or the other. Slightly more, reasonably more, much more, and it's either 1, 2, 3. And we write both the letter in the box and the number. Now, here's an example. This was a little example we used where people were looking at problems, increasing foreign competition, growing economic uncertainty. These are all problems. Rapidly changing consumer taste. Which of these are the more important problems and which are less? Now, I'll show you one. If you look at increasing foreign competition A, slide over to B, and you'll see against growing economic uncertainty, that group picked B by slight, B1. Now we come down the stairs. The next one is growing economic uncertainty against rapidly changing technology, and they picked B and by 3. Now what you do is you come down the stairs one after another to ensure randomness. Go back to the top, down again, back to the top, and down again. And after that we rate, and we got the scores you see on the right hand side. Total score of 20. Now A got 7. B got 9. Now we convert those into percentage of importance. For A, 7 out of 20 was around 35%. B, 9 out of 20, like 45 and down. So not only are you ranking them in order of importance, but also giving the percentage of importance. It's a great way to cause conversation when people talk, listen to each other, make a choice, and they know how well they've agreed, and they know what other people are thinking, and they come up with a group decision. These are the skills. Consensus is vital. When it comes to evaluation, you've got a group, you've got to have consensus. You can't move on without consensus. Otherwise, you're going to have outliers who have lost their heart. And you don't vote, you get consensus. Big, big thing. First of all, difference in perceptions are good, not bad. You have 5 different ways of looking at it. It's beautiful because we got some choices and we can hear other people and we get smarter. You've got to listen carefully. Active listening is not a nice to have. It's vital because you understand the facts behind what people are saying. You've got to use simple language. When I left Procter & Gamble, simplicity was the big thing. I learned you never know what the words mean unless they're really, really simple, and that's what we call simplexity. Simple, simple. Don't worry about little differences. Just build on the big things you agree on and evolve some words that make it better. Say by the end of the week instead of Thursday or Friday. Don't argue. Give unusual options good here. We talked about that. Why aren't we picking this one here? Let's talk about it. Now, good teams are able to get beyond protecting their sales department or their HR department. Let's get some good selections. Let's get everybody involved and say what you think. A lot of people will shrink in when they start choosing. And if there's 7 people in the room, and you've got an idea of what you got to do, and the other 6 people are going in a very different direction, what you got to avoid is saying, well, there's something wrong with me, I'll go along with them, and you don't say anything. You might as well not be on the team because you may be the one with a really great spark that moves it. Classically, that's been called groupthink, and this is how you avoid groupthink. You make sure you listen to everybody, and a good facilitator is going to help. The group has to help itself. Don't let higher status people or more vocal people swing the group. And if you are the boss, you got to be very good at involving other people and making sure that you want to hear what they say. Now, we use a technology called telescoping. We just published it in a major journal, and we'd like you to have a look at it, but here's some of the highlights. Telescoping, if you might remember, is let's do it in 3 steps. First, we reduce the huge amount of information we've got, or the huge number of ideas, into a more manageable number. And we kind of individually make our choices, and we bring it down to a smaller number. Now, the smaller number, we don't judge them. We discuss them to understand. Every selected idea by each person is explained to understand and clarify, and then we work hard on getting down to the critical few by consensus, and we rewrite them simply and clearly so that everybody is in the ballpark with it. You can always add another one, and you can always agree to let another one out, but you've got to agree. Now, what happens often is you end up, by deferring judgment as you evaluate, keep an open mind, you end up with a hybrid of ideas. And complex problems usually need a system. several ideas joined together. So it's gonna happen one after another. They're gonna attack it, but you are able to synergize those ideas by listening to each other. Yeah, does deferring judgment really impact creativity? It sure does, and we have provided, we have a huge amount of research. We research what we do. We now have published scientific evidence that deliberately keeping an open mind, deferring judgment, makes you better at idea evaluation as well as generation. And you can go to our website to find that that article that's now been published. Now, the research that's quoted is, we studied, does the evaluation step contribute a lot other than just simply picking? And we showed that skillfully, we can improve the quality of ideas while they're being evaluated, and often brand new high quality ideas emerge. And telescoping enables groups to more skillfully evaluate ideas which they've been generated. New ideas pop up. In this study, it was with a bunch of hospitals, 5 hospitals, 34 teams of 6 to 8 members. Frontline people, doctors, nurses, specialists, and members of administration. They listed ideas to solve problems like, how might we ensure every chemotherapy patient begins their treatment within 1/2 hour of the scheduled start time? Well-defined problem. They would generate maybe 50 ideas, and then they would bring them down and they would evaluate some of their very best ideas through telescoping with good facilitation. Here are our findings. The final ideas picked, a significant number would not have been picked if majority vote had been used. They never would have made it. So these findings show the benefits of avoiding voting by the plague. Now, of the final ideas selected, a lot of them emerged during the discussion, the second and third stages, and they were different. Of the final ideas, a bunch of them were ideas that only got 1 vote in the first stage and would have been eliminated early. And a significant percentage voted best did not make it in the first round by majority, didn't make it to the final selections, weren't that good. They would have been done, but they weren't that good. Now, the other thing is telescoping increases commitment, participation, understanding. A significant number of new ideas emerged, expanding the total number of ideas generated. So the evaluation step actually acted to increase the number of ideas generated. Now, here's an example of what happens if you don't evaluate with an open mind. This is a real example. I was helping a product development team who were trying to improve the handling of household trash. Somebody came up with, that's a really good problem to solve. Let's go for it. Now, many ideas came through, and one of them was pretty imaginative. If you can picture a cardboard box, looks like a pizza box, and you kind of go poof, you hit it, and all of a sudden it opens up into a freestanding trash container, and inside are several polyethylene bags nested. Now, every time you go and fill one up, you tie it up and pull it out, and it looks nice. It's in the one for the kitchen, one for the bathroom, and you simply pull a cord and out it goes. It looks nice. Now, the problem, one fact was this would be about 10% cost per bag more than what they're paying for bags now. Now, you could remember polyethylene bags came in when we were still using just bags that we got that were made of cardboard and unsightly, etc., and people were willing to pay. Now, here's what they did to evaluate it. They used a very standard technique. Market research wrote a single paragraph description of the idea in words and gave it to a bunch of consumers. And nobody thought of, that's just the way we're going to do it. Tell them. And people didn't like it that much because of the cost. Now, if they'd been more creative, how do we evaluate this idea? Maybe they'd do more than just writing a paragraph, and they might have found out that people, if they tried it, they might have liked it. But that idea got shelved, but it was a great idea. But sometimes we take it, let's get it out of the way as soon as possible. It's a little bit too different. Now, you remember the coat story. We generated, to beat Irish Spring or get into the ballpark, we generated a whole bunch of ideas, 300. Finally, the new product beat Irish Spring in a blind test, and the team had spent 6 months wasting their time working on the wrong problem. It was a refreshment problem, not a green stripe problem, and defining the property up front would have saved a lot of time. But now we had a new problem. Guess how many patents there were in the world governing how you mix 2 different colors of soap together, this in case white and blue, 6 of them were preventing, and there was a problem in the machinery designed to make it. So now we're in optimization. Here's what we thought about it. How are we going to do this? Well, we got the patent department to build pictures like we have across the top of the 6 patents that were in the way. They actually showed the problem parts. And we brought in a bunch of people of all kinds to look these over and look for ideas on how we might break through. And the idea came in about 10 minutes, maybe a little more. One of the people who was maybe the least technical knowledge education noticed a small detail and said, you know, if we made the hole 1/2 inch rather than 1/4 inch, I think we'd be okay. And that was the solution. So it's important to let everybody talk, let them speak, and often people have good ways to evaluate because they know less and they can ask simple questions. Now, here's a group of people who wanted to see how do our best ideas stack up. And they generated a lot of ideas on 7 different challenges, and each challenge had some pretty good ideas. How do we get to the very best? Now, here's the list and the criteria that they pick. Speed of implementation, cost, total cost ideas, resources, feasibility, Wall Street expectations, impact on loyalty, barrier to entry. So they had about 29 of them, and they're the ones they picked. So now we're evaluating the best of the best, and these are the ones they picked: impact on loyalty, feasibility, speed of implementing, competitive advantage, and can't be copied, financial impact. They were used to further evaluate the very best ideas that came from 7 challenges. In other words, we had to think about how are we going to do this in the aggregate, where we got a bunch of people who are working very hard, big hitters, and get them down to the very, very best few. Now, here's another example. This is an engineering example where we've got some pretty interesting options. And in fact, in this case, it was product development, and we were working with how do we get a project that we could get done in 9 months. And we had 65 new product development project candidates. We were really creative, and we came up with a whole bunch of possibilities. Now, that's 65 of them. And how in the world are we going to make our list more manageable? And we thought, you know, is there one criterion which is overarching, and maybe we could all agree on it? Well, we generated the criteria and looked for one, and sure enough, one of the key criteria was, how many of these can be executed in 9 months? That was a given. You could not do anything worse beyond that. It turned out only 13 could be achieved, so that reduced our list automatically to 13, and then we could work with this to evaluate them better using additional criteria. So you've got to be creative on how are we going to manage our ideas in every situation and how are we going to evaluate them. Now, this is another one where we had a very technical group of people had come down to 2 distinct options for making a better product than they had, and they didn't know which way to go. They were both good, and how do you choose among these? Because you can't put your resources into both of them. Time wouldn't allow it, and resources would not allow it. Well, what they did was said, who are we trying to please? Let's go back. And so how might the customer, what do the customers really need? And they picked the best and most important customer needs. Put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Then they used telescoping to gain alignment around customer needs. And they divided them into some are musts and some are wants. What are the highest priority ones? Then they created a grid and ranked each option with a must-want. Is it a must? Is it a want? Well, obviously a must is more important than a want. Then they identified the gaps. How much work is going to be required to fill the gap for each option? Using that, they created the ideal spec, and then they selected the best option that would meet that spec, and they decided to move towards implementation. There was a lot of talking, a lot of discussion, but they had a framework that they could use by stepping back, and instead of fighting with each other and discussing it left, right, and center, they used a structured process to, as I put up here, and they said, this would work for us, let's go do it. And they put a lot of thought into picking the best of the two options that they've done. Okay, so you require a lot of creativity in evaluation, and we're showing you that you got to put some thought into it, and you've got to be evaluation minded. Now, recapping our learnings. Evaluating starts with diverging. This is critical. You need to be open-minded about the evaluation. You can't let something that bothers a lot of people who are conceptualization-oriented is that often they can see, or generation-oriented, they can often see what the right way to look at a problem is and probably the right solution. And yet they know that idea goes forward to people in management, and they might have hidden reasons for picking what they want to do anyway. And so they often will trump what is obviously the right thing to do for the business by something that they've got in their mind, and off they go. So you've got to get everybody diverging first before they jump into picking something that's going to be for some hidden reason that we don't know, or something that's going to be for the next 3 months instead of really, really good. Next thing, I think we've seen that picking the ideas best requires being creative. You just don't take some tool, like let's put everything up on this grid here and give it numbers and then join it. You got to be thinking about, how do we involve other people? How do we get people to say what they're thinking? What's the best methodology we're going to use? Maybe it should be paired comparison analysis. Maybe it should be something else. But you've got to be creative about it, and creative involves involving people, bringing out the best of them, being careful not to let higher level people take over, or talking to people. I've been in situations where we're trying to evaluate, and it's a group of people doing possibly a church thing or a benevolent thing they're trying to do, or a city thing, make some choices, and you bring in lots of people to get their input. And sometimes you find out there are going to be one or two key clients. There's the group that really needs to get something done, the small number of people, but you might get somebody who is only there to help but has got their own agenda, and they start taking up a lot of the time, and they start saying many, many, many things and not letting other people talk, and yet in the end they're not really the ones who are saddled with the responsibility. So a good facilitator is going to let the group be creative and not let things be drained that way. I can't say more about avoiding voting. You start voting, number one, you didn't talk about it. Number two, there's winners and losers, and nothing's going to work when you got winners and losers. You're going to get people buying into stuff on the surface, but they don't really. And they're going to go back and say, I never voted for it, and I know it'll fail. So you want to make sure that at every step of the wheel, fact-finding, problem defining, idea finding, has consensus built in, and people, you work very hard to get complete consensus on everything. Otherwise, it's a house of cards. You go to the next step, and there's no commitment. Next step, no commitment. You end up with something that really isn't going to work, but people just nod their heads to be nice. So you've got to do a good job of not voting happen. I showed you the work that we did that proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. So you don't do enough thinking when you vote, but so often it happens. I discovered telescoping when I look back. There was no such thing, but I always thought, I've trained many people to be good facilitators, and we had this session where it required 5 or 6 groups in the same room of people with a big company. I think it was, I can name a name, Nabisco, Canada, and the idea was, let's work through the process together. Each group goes and we move together, and we got into fact-finding, and we had each group, they had these converging dots, put the dots up, and then the idea was, let's talk about it. Well, I look over to my right, and there was one of my favorite facilitators, and they're already gone on to ideas. So I looked over, I said, could everybody stop for a minute? And I said, Um, um, I can't use her name, but I would. But Charlene, how come you so quickly have gone on to ideas? And she said, well, we voted and we moved on. Wow. I said, holy smokes, can we stop everything? That is not what I taught. But obviously, the learning was not there, and that's one thing that she had skipped. So I brought everybody together. Everybody, all 35 people, come together and let's talk about the process. And I said, look, when you are evaluating and deciding things as a team, you don't vote, you use, I said, you telescope. It's like a giant telescope, broad to narrow. And I went to show the first stage is where you bring it down to a smaller number. Second stage is where you talk about. Third stage is where you choose and you don't vote. So that sticks out in my mind. I'll never forget it. It's where the word telescoping actually came from. Now, be careful of a facilitator who has got his own mission, and he's going to swing those evaluations as you're going, and be careful of that. And if you're the real owner, you should let somebody else facilitate, because it's awfully hard on you not to try to swing the group your way. So let somebody else do the facilitating, the grid, or whatever you do. And as our experiments showed, it does work. It's not just something we like. We showed it with real numbers. Finally, get input from everyone and listen carefully. This is where you're a facilitator. You can really help out. If you see a person in your group who isn't saying much, you've got to know by just being a human being, that person's got some good thoughts. And what you need to do is just draw them out somehow and make sure that people are listening. One way I've used is if everybody's in that group, maybe 10 people, and one or two are not contributing much, I'll say, okay, listen, I'd like everybody to take your thought catcher out and write down one thing you'd like to, you think we ought to do. And everybody does it. They're listening. And then I say, look, everybody share it with the partner beside you. And now the quiet people are sharing it with other people. They're willing to do that. And then I say, listen, from the stuff you've got, how about setting up a whole bunch here as a group and get them up here? And that's a way of getting everybody involved and getting everybody's thoughts up. And nobody had to worry about having to put up their hand if they're worried about it. Okay? These are all key. Remember, we're talking about human beings. We're talking about making good judgments. We're talking about listening to everybody and doing a great job of working together. It's having a conversation, having a good conversation. Okay, Bob, that's all I'm going to say, and hoping that people got something, and I'll let you move on to the last slide.
Thanks, Ben. That was great. Really enjoyed that one, and there are a couple questions coming in, but just before I get into questions, just want to let people, we always finish with next steps. Give us a call, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. We're thrilled that we get so many people tuning in. So, and we do hear from quite a few of you from time to time. So don't hesitate. Give us a call or send us an email. And we've also done a few webinar coaching sessions. We know so many of you are coming or tuning in from all parts of the world, and the technology is available. So if you ever have something that you want to run by us and work through us, let's use the technology. We'd be happy to do a coaching session with you. Our next workshop is a level 1 and 2 accelerated one. It's a 3-day workshop. These are the ones that we run 2 to 3 times, sometimes 4 times a year. This one's running from April 14th to 16th in 2015. There is a direct link there, www.basser.com/April 2015 workshop. So if you're interested, please click on that and register. Got a couple of questions here, and one is, and I think you want to move to the next slide just so we can let people know when our next webinar is. So we're changing this up this time. It's the first time we've run a webinar on a Thursday rather than a Tuesday. Busy schedules sort of dictate how what availability we have, especially men. So our next one is going to be Thursday, April the 9th, same time. And as we move through the wheel, this one's called the beginning of the end of the innovation process, building and committing to an action plan. So really going to give people some real good tips into action planning and getting these great ideas that you've now evaluated and selected through towards implementation. So you'll be hearing from us in the next little while, and we'll be sending you a little more information, but I just wanted you to put that on your calendars for Thursday, April the 9th, rather than a Tuesday. So here's a question that just came up, and I'll run it by you. It seems you prefer to set or the model prefers to set the criteria after the idea generation. What do you think of setting after defining the problem?
Yeah, that's a good question, and yeah, it's unless there's some really great circumstances, that's the wrong. I'll just say it's the wrong thing to do. You are getting people to evaluate before they generate. So you've got to get people to be as wide open as possible. And so when you've defined the problem and you really like it, how might we do such and such, whatever it might be? How might we get more people uh, to get in their chairs? Da da da. If you start putting cramps on it right there, you're going to get people thinking of the judgment while they are generating the ideas. Now, let me say something else. There are times when there are some key criteria that are really facts, and they should be introduced during fact finding. Let's be honest with each other. If somebody has said, one of the things we're doing in solving this problem is we know that we're going to have to get the salespeople involved. We know that. Well, that's got to be a fact you put up there. You don't put later on. You say, well, how might we do so and so, and leave the salespeople out or something like that. Put that up early. Get all the stuff in there that you know are facts. Somebody's got to say that's a fact. Now, with that done, that's going to probably change your how might we to some extent. Now, when you do the how might we, you've got to stay wide open. Now, there is something called I forget what we call it, but where we start narrowing the problem down. I mean, if you say, for example, how might we get everyone involved? Okay, let's go for it. Now somebody says, okay, let's make it tighter. How might we get everyone involved on the same day? Oh, well, that's a little tighter, if that's a vital thing. How might we get everybody involved on the same day with the least amount and at no cost? Well, now you've deliberately decided to bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. Now, if all of you decide to do that, by George, go for it. Knock yourself out. So that's important. We got to agree. We got to agree on what the how might we is. But once you have, don't start throwing in criteria for solutions. Solutions are later on. That's afterwards. That's step 5. And if you've open-mindedly come up with a lot of ideas, now we bring in criteria which are going to evaluate those particular solutions you came up with later on. I hope that makes some sense.
And here's another one. At what point during the telescoping process do you begin to apply the criteria you have developed?
Oh, yeah, that I think is if you're in step 5, you have brought up the criteria. I think that's almost the first step. By what criteria are we going to evaluate? Now you use telescoping on the choice of criteria. Very good question. And if you get 15, 20, 30 criteria, okay, let's get it down to which ones are the most important. And then you use the telescoping process to choose the small number of really important criteria, 4 or 5, because you can't use 50. Now, when you get into evaluating against those criteria, you've got to use telescoping when you actually do the evaluation against those criteria, and you listen, you clarify, etc. That's a very good question.
Here's one that I kind of can probably help with the answer here, but I think it's a good one. Have you used technology platforms like Candor to capture ideas, comments from people in a parallel fashion? In principle, these being useful to encourage introverted people to participate.
Well, I'll take Bob. Do you want to try?
No, you go ahead. I was going to say,
okay, yeah.
we encourage anywhere we can get people to participate, and we know that it's different. A lot of companies do use technology platforms to capture ideas, and we would definitely be encouraging that kind of anywhere we can get the diverge process to be kickstarted or to improve on the number of ideas is a good thing.
Yeah, I think what you want to do as much as possible is get people involved. And the ideal, of course, is we're all together in a group here in the room, and we can see each other, we can talk to each other, and there we want to bring people out in other ways to say what they're thinking, etc. It's much stronger. If you are somehow in different places and you can't really see each other or hear each other or see something to each other, by all means, let people somehow get them in there. But it's in a way, it's begging the issue a little bit where you're saying, well, here's the worst thing, where people start voting from a distance, and then we just start moving on, voting without discussion. So by all means, do what you can. And in today's age, you got people all over the place, and that's where a master facilitator comes in to give people credit for being willing to throw something up, that kind of thing. So that's another one where you got to do what you can with what you got, and get the main ideas of innovate or evaluating done. Is that okay, Bob?
That's good.
Yeah.
Here's one, not quite sure how to kind of figure this one out. How to work with peer competition on ideas pitching. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Is there a way to, people
Yeah.
are competing
Yeah.
on some ideas. How do you work within
Yeah.
that parameter? We've seen some with business plan
Yeah.
competitions and things like that, but
Yeah.
not something I've run into. But it could be something inside an organization. I think that different
Yeah.
teams working on things.
Yeah. Here's what I'm going to try. Here's my best example, and I'm so glad that came up. It may not be it exactly, but I could use the name of the company, but I won't. It's a major, one of the world's biggest companies, hires the very best people from Harvard and Yale and everywhere else. They bring them in, and the only way these folks have been taught how to impress people is showing everybody how smart they are. So they go into the meeting. There is no process. They're not using any kind of a creative process. They're just talking. And so when an idea comes up, the only way they can show how smart they are is to shoot it down. And that's where the competition starts. And we go around and around with people just booting ideas around, competing with each other to show how smart they are. What we did for this company, and the people loved it, was thank God we don't have to do this anymore. We work together, we collaborate, we show each other how good we are by how well we build and collaborate. Now, today's people are getting tired of going into the competitiveness in the old-fashioned companies. They want collaboration. They want listening to each other, and this is where we're heading. I wrote a chapter in a book called Millennial Spring, where we're going and collaborating, where we're going in the future, and business is going to change, so that competition goes. Now, if you've got some kind of another thing, you've got people pitching their ideas to Dragon's Den. Well, we're not talking about working with each other. We're trying to win the money. But whenever we're trying to work together, we've got to learn how to build together. And as soon as you start trying to vote and you start getting people to compete with each other, young people aren't going to go for that too much more if they know there's a process and they're going to collaborate. And I think the really wise people who run companies are much smarter than letting that happen. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
No, I think that was pretty good. I think we're approaching the end of our questions. I'm going to look see if there's any more here. No, I think that's it. So I want to make. I've had a couple of people ask me just privately questions whether the slides would be available, and anybody who's attended today, the slides are going to be available. They're going to be sent an email to you. We also will have, as we record all our webinars, the webinar has been recorded. It should be up on our website. It's possible it'll be up tomorrow, but at the latest, it'll be up on Thursday, and everybody will get an email with a link. And again, everybody who's attended will get not only the link, but you also get a copy of the slide. So a big thank you to everyone for attending. Another thing, if people are out there, and we get a lot of people from the academic world, if you have any interest in some research topics or doing something together, we really would encourage you to contact us. We would be most interested in collaborating, maybe on some research, some authoring. We have a number of different things in the book on the books right now where we're working on some publications. So don't hesitate. Give us a ring. It would be there's a lot of stuff to cover, and we have lots of data that we collect, and we'd love to be part of some type of research
Yeah,
project
Bob,
if you're
yeah,
interested.
Bob, if I could mention, this all started when I left Procter & Gamble. It's called the Center for Research in Applied Creativity, So what we've done ever since then is we've put equal emphasis on researching applied creativity and doing it. It's a circular thing. While we do it, we learn, and research projects come out of it, and then things are learned that become things that we teach other people. So very circular. We do both of them. So research is, and of course it involves people. The more people that can help out with the research, the better the questions, the better the implementation that comes out in the publishing as well.
Okay. Well, we're almost at our hour. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in today, and look for a couple emails from me in the next couple of days, and put April 9th on your calendars for our next one. Until then, have a great day, and thank you again. Great job, man.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.